I thought I was being generous when my brother Jake's in-laws showed up unannounced at our luxury all-inclusive resort in Cancun. The Hendersons arrived with designer clothes on their backs, but claimed they had no money for extras and forgot to pack. Within hours, they were ordering premium spa treatments and expensive excursions, expecting me to cover everything. As I watched them laugh about how generous family should be, I realized this wasn't forgetfulness. It was calculated manipulation. The vacation I had saved 2 years for was about to become my worst nightmare. Standing in the marble lobby of Coral Sands Resort, I felt pure satisfaction watching the bellhop wheel my luggage toward the Ocean View suite. 2 years of saving every penny from my marketing coordinator salary had finally paid off. At 32, I had learned to treat myself well, and this $8,000 week in paradise was going to be perfect. My brother Jake bounded through the entrance with his wife Brittany, both grinning like teenagers. At 29, Jake still had that boyish enthusiasm that made everyone love him instantly. Brittany, 27, and perpetually put together, waved at me with manicured nails that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Almira, this place is incredible," Jake called out, spinning around to take in the soaring ceilings and tropical flower arrangements. "I can't believe you planned all this." The three of us had coordinated this family reunion for months. Jake and Brittany had booked their own room, and we'd agreed to split resort activities fairly. I was looking forward to quality time with my brother after months of busy work schedules keeping us apart. That's when the automatic doors whooshed open again and my stomach dropped. 4 people I definitely hadn't invited strolled in like they owned the place. Gary Henderson, Brittany's father, was a stocky man in his late 50s with salt and pepper hair and the kind of confident swagger that usually meant trouble. His wife Linda, a bleached blonde woman in her early 50s, wore a flowing sundress that screamed expensive despite her claims of financial hardship. Behind them came Tyler, Brittany's 25-year-old brother, with his arm around a young woman I'd never met. "Surprise!" Linda shrieked, rushing toward me with arms outstretched. "We decided last minute to join the family fun." I stood frozen as she enveloped me in a cloud of overwhelming perfume. Gary clapped his hands together, beaming like he'd just delivered the best news imaginable. "Hope you don't mind the extra company, Almira," he said, not sounding remotely concerned about whether I minded. "Family should stick together, especially somewhere this fancy." Tyler grinned and gestured to the blonde beside him. "This is my girlfriend, Haley. She's never been to Mexico before, so this is perfect timing." Brittany rushed to smooth things over her voice, taking on that artificially sweet tone she used when she was nervous. "I know we didn't plan this, but isn't it wonderful that everyone can be together? The more family, the better, right?" I glanced at Jake, hoping for support, but he was staring at his shoes. Warning bells started ringing in my head, but I forced a smile. Maybe they'd actually planned and paid for their own accommodations. "Where are you staying?" I asked, trying to keep my voice light. Linda's laugh had a sharp edge to it. "Well, that's the thing. Everything was booked so last minute, and with Gary being out of work, money's been tight. We were hoping the family could help us figure something out." The resort concierge, a polished young man named Diego, approached our group with a professional smile. "Welcome to Coral Sands. How may I assist you today?" Gary stepped forward like he belonged there. "We need accommodations for 4 people. Something nice since we're celebrating family time." "I'll need to check availability and payment information," Diego replied smoothly. That's when Linda turned those puppy dog eyes on me. "Almira, honey, you're so good with these vacation things. Could you help us out, just until we get sorted?" The lobby suddenly felt suffocating. I'd budgeted precisely for this trip, calculating every meal, every activity, every tip. Adding 4 more people wasn't just inconvenient, it was financially impossible. But with everyone staring at me expectantly, including other guests who'd started to notice our group, I found myself nodding. Let me see what I can do. 20 minutes later, I'd charged an additional $3,000 to my credit card for a connecting suite. The Hendersons were effusive in their gratitude, promising to pay me back once they got things sorted at home. At dinner that evening, I began to understand the true scope of my mistake. The resort's main restaurant offered everything from casual fare to premium selections, and the Hendersons went straight for the most expensive options on the menu. Gary ordered the $38 lobster tail without blinking. Linda chose the $42 Wagyu beef, commenting loudly about how she deserved something special after the stress of travel. Tyler and Haley shared appetizers that cost more than most people's entire meals, giggling about living it up in paradise. When the server brought the wine list, Gary's eyes lit up. Let's get something celebratory. Family reunions call for the good stuff. He pointed to a bottle that made my chest tighten. $120 for wine I couldn't even pronounce. Maybe we should start with something a little more modest, I suggested carefully. Linda waved her hand dismissively. Oh, don't worry about money tonight, sweetie. We're family. Besides, this is a special occasion. The bill arrived, and Gary made a show of patting his pockets dramatically. Well, wouldn't you know it? I must have left my wallet back in the room. Brittany, honey, did you bring yours? Brittany looked genuinely embarrassed. Dad, we agreed you'd handle dinner tonight. Family helps family, Linda interjected smoothly. Almira, you don't mind covering this one meal, do you? We'll settle up everything tomorrow. Jake finally spoke up, but not in the way I'd hoped. It's fine, sis. We're all here together, that's what matters. I paid the $438 dinner bill, my hands shaking slightly as I signed the receipt. Later that night, as I tried to fall asleep in my beautiful suite, I heard voices drifting from the Hendersons' adjoining room. Tyler was on the phone, and his words made my blood run cold. Dude, we're getting a completely free luxury vacation. My sister married into the perfect family. Her sister-in-law is totally loaded and way too nice to say no. We're going to milk this for everything it's worth. She'll never have the guts to call us out in front of everyone. I lay awake until dawn, staring at the ceiling and realizing that my generous gesture had just painted a target on my back. The soft knock on my door at 6 a.m. should have been my first clue that the nightmare was just beginning. I stumbled out of bed expecting maybe hotel housekeeping or my brother with early breakfast plans. Instead, I found a resort staff member holding a clipboard with a concerned expression. Miss Rodriguez, I'm sorry to disturb you, but there seems to be some confusion with your account. We have several charges from last night that were authorized using your name, but we wanted to confirm. My mouth went dry as I scanned the itemized list. $600 in room service charges, champagne caviar premium steaks, all delivered to the Henderson suite between 11 p.m. and 3 a.m. The timing explained everything. While I'd been lying awake processing Tyler's phone conversation, his family had been living it up on my credit card. There must be some mistake. I managed, though we both knew there wasn't. The staff member nodded sympathetically. The charges were authorized by a Mr. Gary Henderson, who said he was acting on your behalf for family accommodations. Should we reverse these? Before I could answer, Linda appeared in the hallway wearing a silk robe that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Her smile was bright enough to power the entire resort. Oh, good, you're handling the little mix-up, she chirped, as if ordering hundreds of dollars in room service without permission was equivalent to borrowing a cup of sugar. The resort billing system is so confusing, isn't it? But don't worry about making a fuss. It's just small money between family. The staff member looked between us, clearly uncomfortable. I realized that if I made a scene in the hallway, word would spread throughout the resort. Other guests would witness family drama, and I'd look petty for arguing over money during what was supposed to be a celebration. It's fine. I heard myself saying the words tasting like ash. Just keep the charges as they are. Linda beamed and patted my arm like I was a well-behaved child. You're such a sweetheart, Almira. This is why we love you so much. By 9 a.m., I needed coffee desperately. The resort's breakfast buffet was included in my package, but as I entered the dining area, I spotted the Henderson women at a corner table that was completely covered in dishes. They'd apparently decided to sample everything the buffet offered, creating a feast fit for 20 people. Haley waved me over enthusiastically. Almira, we saved you a seat. Isn't this food incredible? We've never been somewhere with unlimited everything before. As I sat down with my simple coffee and croissant, Linda leaned forward conspiratorially. I've been thinking about spa treatments today. The resort has this amazing package couples massage, full body wraps, the works. It's exactly what us ladies need to bond properly. My stomach clenched. How much does something like that usually cost? Oh, I don't know exactly, Linda said airily. But money shouldn't matter when it comes to family experiences, right? Besides, you work so hard, you deserve to be pampered. She made it sound like she was doing me a favor by suggesting I pay for her luxury spa day. Why don't we ask Brittany what she thinks? I suggested, hoping my sister-in-law might inject some reason into the conversation. But Brittany was scrolling through the spa menu on her phone, her eyes sparkling. Mom's right. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The seaweed body wrap sounds amazing, and look at this list of essential oil massages. An hour later, I found myself in the spa reception area, watching Linda sign us up for treatments that totaled $1,200. The receptionist, a serene woman named Maria, confirmed that everything would be charged to my room. Just to clarify, I said carefully, these charges will be split among the three of us, right? Linda looked genuinely confused by the question. Oh, sweetie, you know Gary and I are having money troubles right now, but this was such a thoughtful idea having you treat us to sister bonding time. You're going to love how relaxed we all feel afterward. I realized with growing horror that Linda had somehow twisted the situation so that what started as her suggestion had become my generous gift to them. The other spa clients in the waiting area were smiling at our conversation, probably thinking how lovely it was to see family members being so generous with each other. The massage was torture. While skilled hands worked on my shoulders, my brain calculated the running total of unexpected expenses. Between the room, the dinner, the room service, and now the spa treatments, I was already approaching $5,000 beyond my original budget. When we emerged from the spa 3 hours later, Gary and Tyler were waiting in the lobby with shopping bags from the resort boutiques. Gary wore new designer sunglasses that still had the price tag attached, $240. Tyler had apparently bought a complete new wardrobe, including board shorts, linen shirts, and leather sandals. There's the beautiful ladies, Gary called out jovially. We decided to do some shopping while you were getting pampered. Hope you don't mind that we put everything on the family account. We figured you'd want us to look good in all the vacation photos. Tyler held up a watch box from the jewelry counter. And Haley deserves something special for her first trip to Mexico. This little bracelet was calling her name. I didn't even want to know how much a bracelet from a luxury resort jewelry counter would cost. Jake appeared from the pool area, water still dripping from his swim. When he saw all the shopping bags, his face went pale. He pulled me aside away from the group. Almira, I need to talk to you privately, he said, his voice strained. Can we go somewhere quiet? We walked to a secluded area near the tennis courts where Jake ran his hands through his wet hair and looked like he was about to be sick. I didn't know they were coming, he began. Brittany told me about it in the taxi from the airport. She said her parents were having financial problems since Gary lost his job 6 months ago, and they really needed this vacation for their mental health. My brother's words hit me like a physical blow. You mean this was planned? They didn't just show up spontaneously. Jake nodded miserably. Brittany begged me not to embarrass her family by making them leave. She said if I really loved her, I'd support them during this difficult time. She promised they'd pay their own way once we got here, but they never intended to pay for anything, I finished. I'm so sorry, Almira. I know how hard you worked to save for this trip. But Brittany says if I don't support her family, it means I don't support her. I don't know what to do. Looking at my brother's conflicted face, I realized he was caught between loyalty to his wife and loyalty to me. And unfortunately, marriage had won. That evening at dinner, the Hendersons outdid themselves. Gary ordered not one but 2 premium entrees, claiming he couldn't decide between the surf and turf. Linda insisted we needed multiple bottles of wine because celebrations shouldn't be stingy. Tyler and Haley treated the meal like their personal tasting menu, ordering appetizers, soups, salads, and desserts like they were royalty. When I gently suggested that we might want to be a bit more mindful of costs, the entire table went silent. Then Linda's eyes filled with tears. "I've never felt so unwelcome anywhere in my life," she whispered, her voice trembling. "We're just trying to celebrate family and you're worried about pennies." Gary's expression hardened. "I have to say, Almira, this focus on money is really disappointing. Family takes care of family, especially when some members are more fortunate than others." Brittany jumped to her parents' defense immediately. "Almira, I know you're used to managing every detail, but sometimes you need to just let people enjoy themselves without counting every dollar." The other diners were starting to stare. I felt trapped between causing a public scene and letting this financial assault continue. "You're right," I said quietly. "I'm sorry for bringing up money. Let's just enjoy dinner." But as we walked back to our rooms afterward, I overheard Tyler on his phone again this time, talking to someone named Brandon. "Bro, you should see this place. We've got our own personal ATM machine in the form of my sister's uptight sister-in-law. She's so worried about looking bad that she'll pay for anything we want. Tomorrow we're thinking about booking some of those expensive excursions, deep-sea fishing, helicopter tours, the works. This is the best vacation scam ever." That night, I called the concierge to check my account balance. The number made me nauseous. In less than 48 hours, the Hendersons had charged over $6,000 to my credit card. At this rate, I'd max out my available credit before the vacation was halfway over. But the real gut punch came when I overheard Gary talking to someone in the hotel lobby at midnight. "We've upgraded our room to a premium suite," he was saying, sounding smugly satisfied. "The family coordinator approved it. That's my daughter's sister-in-law. She's loaded and trying to impress us. We also added a private cabana rental for the rest of the week. This is working out even better than we planned." I checked my phone and found 3 new charges totaling another $2,000. The Hendersons had been busy while I was trying to sleep. As I stood in the moonlit lobby watching Gary laugh with his friend about his successful manipulation tactics, I realized this wasn't just about money anymore. They weren't just taking advantage of my generosity, they were actively humiliating me while documenting it for their entertainment. The themed dinner night at Coral Sands was supposed to be the highlight of our vacation, a tropical celebration with authentic Mexican cuisine, live music, and traditional dancing. I'd been looking forward to it since I first booked the trip. Instead, it became the stage for my most public humiliation yet. The Hendersons had clearly planned their strategy in advance. As soon as we were seated at our large table near the central courtyard, Gary stood up and clinked his fork against his wine glass. The sound rang out across the entire dining area, drawing the attention of dozens of other guests. "Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention for just a moment," he announced in a booming voice that carried to every corner of the restaurant. "I want to take a second to recognize someone very special tonight." My stomach dropped as I realized where this was heading. My daughter Brittany here married into the most generous family you could imagine. Gary continued gesturing toward me with a proud smile. Her sister-in-law Almira has been treating our entire family to this incredible vacation experience. She insisted on covering everything: rooms, meals, activities, spa treatments, because she believes family should take care of family. Other guests began applauding, smiling at me with warm approval. Several people at nearby tables raised their wine glasses in my direction. An elderly woman called out, "How wonderful! What a generous spirit!" I sat frozen, my face burning with embarrassment as the entire restaurant celebrated my supposed generosity. Gary wasn't done yet. "In fact," he said, his voice growing even louder, "Almira has been so thoughtful that she's arranged for unlimited champagne at our table tonight. She wants everyone to celebrate family love." Before I could object, 3 servers appeared with bottles of premium champagne, the kind that costs $40 per bottle. They began filling glasses for not just our table, but several surrounding tables, as Gary had somehow expanded his announcement to include nearby diners in the family celebration. Linda dabbed at her eyes with her napkin, playing her part perfectly. "Almira has such a beautiful heart. She reminds me so much of my late mother, who always believed that when you're blessed, you bless others." The manipulation was masterful. I was trapped in a web of public expectations, surrounded by strangers who now viewed me as wonderfully generous. If I tried to correct the narrative or refuse to pay, I'd look petty and selfish in front of everyone. Tyler raised his champagne glass high. "To Almira, the most awesome sister-in-law in the world." The entire restaurant erupted in cheers and applause. I had no choice but to smile and wave, playing along with their performance, while internally calculating that this single evening was going to cost me another $800 in champagne alone. After dinner, Linda pulled me aside for what she called a heart-to-heart on the resort's moonlit terrace. She'd clearly been practicing this conversation. "Sweetie, I hope you know how much this means to us," she began, her voice taking on a maternal tone. "Gary hasn't been the same since he lost his job. He feels like he's failed as a provider, you know. But seeing how you've welcomed us into this beautiful experience, it's giving him his confidence back." She placed her hand on my arm, her eyes glistening with what looked like genuine emotion. "You remind me so much of my mother," she continued. "She passed away 5 years ago, but she always said that family is the only thing that really matters in this life. Money comes and goes, but the bonds we create with people we love last forever." Linda paused, letting her words sink in before delivering the final manipulation. "I know this vacation has been expensive, but seeing Gary smile again, seeing Tyler and Haley experience luxury they've never had, watching Brittany feel proud of her family, that's priceless, isn't it?" I found myself nodding, caught up in her emotional performance despite knowing better. "Actually," Linda continued, as if the idea was just occurring to her, "I was thinking it would be beautiful if we could extend our stay by 3 more days. Gary's feeling so much better, and I think the extra relaxation time would really complete his healing process. The additional 3 days would cost another $4,000. But Linda had framed it as therapy for her husband's mental health, making any refusal seem heartlessly cruel. Before I could respond, Jake appeared on the terrace. "Hey ladies, beautiful night, isn't it?" Linda immediately shifted into grandmother mode. "Jake, honey, I was just telling Almira how grateful we are for this family time. It's exactly what Gary needed after everything he's been through." She hugged Jake warmly, and I watched my brother melt under her grandmotherly affection. When Linda pulled back, her eyes were suspiciously moist again. "You know, losing a job at Gary's age isn't just financial stress, it's an identity crisis. But being here, being treated like family by people who care about us, it's rebuilding his sense of worth." Jake looked at me with pleading eyes. It really would mean a lot if they could stay a few extra days. I realized that Linda had perfectly orchestrated this conversation knowing that Jake would support her request and that I'd be outnumbered. The next morning brought fresh horrors. While I was at breakfast, the Henderson crew had booked themselves on every premium excursion the resort offered. Deep sea fishing for Gary and Tyler, $300 per person. A helicopter tour of the Mayan ruins for the ladies, $250 each. Private sunset sailing for the entire group, $800. Tyler had apparently told the activities coordinator that Almira approved everything in advance and that she'd specifically requested the most exclusive experiences available for her family. When I found them poolside showing off their new snorkeling gear and discussing their helicopter tour, Gary greeted me with a huge grin. There's our activities coordinator. Tyler told me you'd arranged all these amazing adventures for us. You really know how to plan a vacation, kiddo. I stared at him, speechless. He'd managed to make it sound like I'd planned and paid for excursions I'd never heard of until that moment. Haley bounced over with her phone practically glowing with excitement. Almira, I have to show you something amazing. She pulled up her Instagram account, which had apparently become a documentation of our entire vacation. Post after post showed the Hendersons enjoying luxury experiences, each one tagged with my name and captions like, "Thanks to the most generous sister-in-law ever, and living our best life thanks to family love." The posts had hundreds of likes and dozens of comments. People were calling me inspiring generous and goals for family relationships. Several of Haley's friends had commented asking if I needed any additional sisters-in-law. This one got over 500 likes, Haley said proudly, showing me a photo of her and Linda in their spa robes. Everyone thinks you're amazing for treating us like this. I realized with growing dread that the Hendersons had created a very public narrative about my generosity. Thousands of people now believed I was willingly and happily funding this elaborate vacation for my brothers-in-laws. If I tried to expose the truth now, I'd look like someone who'd publicly bragged about generosity and then tried to take it back. That evening, Jake found me sitting alone at the resort's quiet bar, nursing a single glass of wine and staring at the ocean. Almira, we need to talk, he said, sliding into the chair beside me. I looked at my brother, really looked at him, and saw a man who was drowning in an impossible situation. Brittany's been crying all afternoon, he said quietly. She thinks you hate her family. I don't hate them, Jake, but they're taking advantage of me and you know it. Jake was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. Brittany told me that if I don't support her family during this difficult time, it means I don't really love her. She said if I choose your side over theirs, she'll know where my true loyalties lie. The devastation in his voice broke my heart. I realized that Brittany had put him in an impossible position to support her family's financial exploitation or risk his marriage. She also said, Jake paused, looking like the words were physically painful. She said maybe this situation is showing her that you've always been selfish and that your success has made you forget where you came from. I felt like I'd been slapped. Is that what you think? Jake met my eyes, and what I saw there shattered something inside me. I don't know what to think anymore. Maybe you do need to learn that family is more important than money. I sat in stunned silence as my own brother essentially told me that I deserved to be financially exploited because I'd been lucky enough to have a good job and savings account. Later that night, as I lay in bed, calculating that I was now approaching $15,000 in unexpected charges, I heard familiar voices through the adjoining room wall. The Europe trip next summer is going to be even better, Tyler was saying. If this Mexico thing goes well, we can probably get sister-in-law to fund a whole European tour. Paris, Rome, London, the works. Gary laughed. The beauty of this setup is that it's sustainable. As long as we keep playing the family card and making everything public, she'll never have the guts to cut us off. Linda's voice joined the conversation. And if she ever tries to say no to anything, we just have Brittany threaten to leave Jake. He'll pressure his sister to keep the peace rather than risk his marriage. My hands were shaking as I realized that this vacation was just the beginning. The Hendersons had developed a long-term strategy to use me as their personal ATM machine, with my own brother as their unwitting accomplice. As I listened to them plan their next financial assault on my savings, I began to understand that I had two choices: submit to years of exploitation or find a way to escape this trap they'd built around me. But the trap was about to get even tighter. The sound of laughter in the resort lobby at 7 a.m. should have been my first warning that the nightmare was about to get worse. I'd come down early hoping to grab coffee and have a few minutes of peace before facing another day of financial hemorrhaging. Instead, I walked into what looked like a reunion party. 6 new people were clustered around the Henderson family, all talking excitedly and gesturing toward the ocean view. My blood turned to ice as I recognized the dynamic. These weren't hotel guests. They were here for us. Gary spotted me approaching and spread his arms wide like he was greeting a long-lost daughter. "Almira, perfect timing. Come meet the gang." A woman in her 40s with an aggressive perm rushed toward me, actually grabbing my hands like we were old friends. "You must be the famous Almira. I'm Jessica, Gary's neighbor. I can't tell you how excited we were when Gary called and invited us to join your family celebration." My mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Gary had invited neighbors to our vacation. A tall man with a beer gut and a golf shirt clapped me on the back. "I'm Dennis, Gary's bowling buddy. This is my wife, Carol. Gary told us you love big family gatherings and insisted we come down for the last 2 days. Said you wouldn't take no for an answer." Carol beamed at me while clutching an enormous beach bag. "It's so generous of you to include Gary's friends in your family vacation. We've never been to an all-inclusive resort before." 2 younger people introduced themselves as Marcus and Tiffany, friends of Tyler and Haley from their community college. Marcus handed me his backpack like I was a concierge. "Tyler said you're covering accommodations for everyone. That's so cool. Which suite is ours?" I stood frozen in the middle of the lobby, surrounded by 6 strangers who believed I'd invited them to join our vacation and pay for their entire stay. The cost of adding 6 more people for 2 days would be at least $6,000, money I absolutely didn't have. Gary leaned close to me, his voice low enough that only I could hear. "I figured you wouldn't mind a few extra family friends. After all, you've been so generous already. It would be pretty awkward to turn them away now that they've bought plane tickets and everything." The manipulation was breathtaking in its audacity. He'd invited people without asking me, told them I'd approved everything, and now positioned their presence as my responsibility. Jessica was already at the front desk telling the clerk, "We're with the Almira Rodriguez party. She's arranged accommodations for us." The desk clerk looked at me expectantly. I realized that if I denied knowing these people, I'd humiliate them in front of the entire lobby. They'd flown to Mexico believing they were invited guests. But if I went along with Gary's fiction, I'd be financially ruined. "There seems to be some confusion," I managed weakly. Gary jumped in immediately, his voice loud enough for everyone to hear. "Oh, you know how vacation planning gets chaotic. Almira's been coordinating so many details for our family celebration. Sometimes the communication gets mixed up between all the different family members." He'd positioned himself as helpful while making me look disorganized and unwelcoming. Brittany appeared at my elbow, having materialized from wherever she'd been hiding during this ambush. "Why don't we sort out the accommodation details privately?" she suggested, steering me toward a quiet corner. Once we were alone, Brittany's sweet facade dropped completely. "Look, Almira, I know this is more than you planned for, but these people have already spent money on flights. If you embarrass my father by turning his friends away, it's going to damage his relationships in our community." Her tone was matter-of-fact, as if the financial burden was just a minor inconvenience I needed to handle. "6 more people for 2 days," she continued. "It's not that much in the scope of everything else. And think how good it will look on social media, you hosting this amazing extended family celebration." I understood the threat clearly. Refuse to pay, and I'd be the villain who humiliated Gary's friends. Go along with it, and I'd be completely broke. 2 hours later, I'd charged another $6,000 to my credit card for 3 additional rooms. The friends were effusive in their gratitude, taking photos with me for their social media accounts and posting about my incredible generosity and family spirit. That afternoon, while Gary's friends were settling into their rooms, I decided to gather evidence. If this situation was going to destroy me financially, at least I'd document what really happened. I started recording conversations on my phone, keeping it discreetly positioned while the Henderson family let their guard down around what they thought were trusted friends. What I captured was worse than anything I'd imagined. "The key is making everything public," Linda was explaining to Jessica by the pool. "Once she's committed to something in front of other people, she can't back out without looking like a total cheapskate. We've got her completely hooked." Gary's voice carried across the water as he talked to Dennis at the swim-up bar. "I call it the perfect fish. Rich enough to afford whatever we want, but too nice and too image-conscious to call us out. We're planning a European tour for next summer, and she's going to fund the whole thing." Tyler was even more explicit with his friend Marcus near the volleyball court. "My sister married into the perfect setup. Her sister-in-law is like a walking ATM machine that dispenses cash whenever you push the right emotional buttons. The guilt trip about family loyalty works every time." But the conversation that made my hands shake with rage happened when I overheard Haley talking to Tiffany in the resort gift shop. "The best part is that she's so desperate to look good that she'll never tell anyone what's really happening. She'll just keep paying and smiling while we live like royalty. Gary figured out that she values her reputation more than her money." As I listened to them laugh about my desperation to look good, I realized they'd been studying me like scientists, identifying my psychological weaknesses and exploiting them systematically. That evening, Jake found me on my room's balcony where I'd been researching the resort's policies and Mexican law on my laptop. "The friends seem nice," he said carefully, clearly testing my mood. "Did you know Gary was inviting them?" I asked, without looking up from my screen. Jake was quiet for so long that I finally turned to face him. His expression told me everything. "Brittany mentioned that her dad might ask a few friends to join us for the last couple of days," he admitted. "She said you'd probably enjoy having a bigger celebration. So you knew and you didn't warn me." "I thought you'd be happy about it." Jake's voice was defensive now. "You always say you wish we saw more of each other's friends and family. This seemed like a perfect opportunity." I stared at my brother, really seeing him for the first time in years. The Jake I'd grown up with, the one who'd protected me from bullies and shared his lunch money when I forgot mine had been replaced by a man who'd rather sacrifice his sister than risk conflict with his wife. $6,000, Jake. $6,000 I don't have for people I've never met who think I invited them here. Jake ran his hands through his hair, looking genuinely distressed. "I know it's expensive, but they've already bought plane tickets. What was I supposed to do?" "You were supposed to stand up for me," I said quietly. "Just once." Jake's face flushed red. "Maybe if you weren't so rigid about money all the time, these situations wouldn't feel so dramatic. Brittany thinks you need to learn that family relationships are more important than your savings account." The words hung between us like a slap. My own brother had just told me that wanting to protect my financial security made me rigid and unsympathetic. Besides, Jake continued, clearly working himself up, You've been sneaky and manipulative recording people's private conversations. That's not the sister I grew up with. I realized that Brittany must have seen me with my phone and reported back to Jake. Even my attempt to document their exploitation was being turned against me. Later that night, I discovered the final piece of their strategy. I was walking past the resort's business center when I heard Gary's voice through the partially open door. He was on a video call with someone, his laptop screen showing a woman I didn't recognize. The beauty of this setup is that we've established a pattern, Gary was saying. She's paid for so much already that refusing anything else would be admitting she made a mistake. People don't like admitting they've been played, so they keep doubling down. The woman on the screen laughed. That's brilliant, Dad. How much do you think you can get out of her total? Well, we're thinking of asking for help with our mortgage catch-up payments when we get home. She's already invested so much in our family relationship that she'll want to protect her investment. I realized I was looking at Brittany's cousin and that the Henderson family was discussing their long-term financial exploitation strategy like a business plan. The vacation was just the beginning, Gary continued. Once we get her helping with the mortgage, we can probably get her involved in Tyler's student loan payments, maybe some car repairs, holiday expenses. Sky's the limit as long as we keep playing the family loyalty angle. As I stood in the darkened hallway listening to them plan my complete financial destruction, I finally understood that this wasn't just about money. It was about power. They'd identified me as someone they could control through guilt and social pressure, and they intended to milk that control for years. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated exactly how far a desperate person would go to escape a trap. As I walked back to my room, I began planning their surprise. I woke up the next morning with absolute clarity. After 5 days of financial and emotional assault, something inside me had crystallized into cold determination. The Hendersons thought they'd broken me down into a compliant ATM machine. They were about to learn that they'd actually created something much more dangerous, a woman with nothing left to lose. My first stop was the resort's business center, where I spent 2 hours creating a detailed spreadsheet of every single charge. Room upgrades, spa treatments, premium meals, excursions, room service, champagne shopping accommodation for friends. The total was $18,437, more than double my original vacation budget. I took screenshots of every receipt, every credit card charge, every conversation I'd recorded. If this was going to be war, I needed ammunition. Next, I visited the concierge desk where I'd developed a genuine rapport with Carmen, one of the resort managers. Carmen was a 30-something Mexican woman with sharp eyes and an MBA from Universidad Nacional. Over the past few days, she'd witnessed enough of the Henderson family dynamics to have her own opinions. "Miss Rodriguez," she said as I approached her desk, "how can I assist you today? I need to understand the resort's policies about unauthorized charges and account management," I said, keeping my voice casual but clear. Carmen's expression shifted slightly. In the hospitality industry, she'd clearly seen this situation before. "Would you like to discuss this privately?" she suggested, gesturing toward her office behind the main desk. Once we were alone, Carmen's professional demeanor relaxed into something more personal. "I have to say, I've been concerned about some of the interactions I've witnessed this week," she began carefully. "The Henderson family has made several demands that seemed unusual for typical family dynamics." I felt a surge of relief that someone else had noticed the dysfunction. "They've been ordering services and charging them to your account without your presence," Carmen continued. "Typically, we require the account holder to authorize charges personally, but Mr. Henderson has been very insistent that you've given blanket approval for family expenses." Carmen pulled up her computer screen showing me a log of interactions with hotel staff. Yesterday, Mrs. Henderson demanded that housekeeping provide premium toiletries and bathrobes to all their friends' rooms. When housekeeping explained these were additional charges, she became quite hostile and insisted you had pre-approved luxury amenities for all family guests. I learned that Tyler had tried to charge $2,000 worth of resort merchandise to my room, claiming I'd told him to buy whatever he wanted as souvenirs. The shop manager had refused without my direct authorization. Most concerning, Carmen said, lowering her voice, is that they've been discussing extending their stay and asking about availability for next winter. Mr. Henderson specifically asked about family package deals and mentioned that you'd be handling all financial arrangements for future visits. My stomach dropped. They were already planning to make this an annual tradition. Carmen leaned forward, her expression serious. Miss Rodriguez, I need to be direct with you. In my 15 years in hospitality, I've seen financial exploitation within families before. What I'm witnessing here has all the characteristics of systematic manipulation. She handed me a folder of documentation. These are copies of every interaction we've had with the Henderson family this week. The pattern is very clear. They're using your name and authority to access services they couldn't afford themselves. I realized Carmen had been building a case file, probably out of concern for the resort's liability as much as sympathy for my situation. What are my options? I asked. Carmen's smile was sharp and professional. Mexican law is very clear about identity theft and fraud. Using someone's name to authorize charges they didn't approve constitutes criminal activity. Additionally, our resort has strict policies about guest conduct and financial responsibility. She walked me through the process. I could dispute all unauthorized charges with my credit card companies, file fraud reports with both Mexican and U.S. authorities, and the resort would provide supporting documentation. More immediately, I could revoke the Henderson family's access to my accounts and require them to provide their own payment methods for any future charges. How quickly could something like that be implemented? I asked. Immediately. We can freeze their charging privileges tonight and require them to settle their current balance before checkout. As I sat in Carmen's office, I realized I'd found not just a solution, but an ally. Carmen understood exactly what was happening and had the authority to help me stop it. My next stop was my room, where I spent the afternoon researching identity theft laws and credit card dispute procedures. I learned that what the Hendersons had been doing constituted multiple felonies under U.S. federal law, and that my credit card companies had extensive fraud protection policies. I called each of my credit card companies, explained the situation, and initiated dispute procedures for all unauthorized charges. The representatives were sympathetic and assured me that family member fraud was unfortunately common and well covered under their protection policies. But the most important part of my preparation was psychological. I needed to understand exactly how the Hendersons operated so I could turn their tactics against them. They used shame and social pressure as weapons. They made everything public to trap me into compliance. They positioned themselves as victims of my supposed selfishness whenever I raised objections. Their greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. They'd built their entire strategy around the assumption that I valued my reputation more than my money. They thought I'd rather be financially destroyed than publicly embarrassed. They were about to discover they'd seriously misjudged me. That evening, I gave the performance of my lifetime. At dinner, I was gracious and smiling, telling stories about how wonderful it had been to get to know Gary's friends and how family celebrations should always be inclusive. Gary preened under my apparent gratitude. Almira, you've really outdone yourself this week. This has been the vacation of a lifetime for all of us. Linda reached across the table to squeeze my hand. You've shown us what generosity really looks like. This experience has taught us so much about family values. Tyler raised his glass. To Almira, who's proven that blood isn't the only thing that makes people family. I smiled and toasted along with everyone else, playing my part perfectly. What they didn't know was that I was saying goodbye. After dinner, I pulled Jake aside for what I knew would be our last conversation as we'd known it. "I want you to know that I love you," I said, looking directly into his eyes. "No matter what happens, you'll always be my brother." Jake looked confused by my intensity. "What do you mean, no matter what happens? Everything's fine, isn't it?" I hugged him tightly. "I hope someday you'll understand the choices I've had to make." As I walked back to my room that night, I felt lighter than I had in days. I'd spent the week being reactive, trying to manage damage and minimize harm, but now I was taking control. I had documented evidence of systematic fraud. I had institutional support from the resort. I had legal protection from my credit card companies. And most importantly, I had a plan that would use the Henderson family's greatest weapon, public humiliation, against them. They thought they'd trapped me in a web of social expectations and family loyalty, but they'd actually provided me with the perfect stage for their downfall. As I packed my belongings that night, I thought about the sunrise I'd be watching from an airplane window in just a few hours. The Hendersons were expecting to wake up to another day of luxury funded by my credit cards. Instead, they were going to wake up to the most expensive lesson of their lives. The final dinner at Coral Sands was a masterpiece of theatrical performance. I'd spent hours preparing for this moment, crafting every word and gesture to deliver maximum impact. The Henderson family had no idea they were attending their own farewell party. We were seated at the largest table in the resort's main restaurant, surrounded by their friends and other guests who'd been drawn into our extended family celebration over the past week. The setting was perfect for what I had planned. As the appetizers arrived, I stood up and gently tapped my wine glass with my fork. The familiar sound drew attention from across the restaurant, just as Gary had done earlier in the week when he'd publicly trapped me into paying for champagne. I hope everyone won't mind if I take just a moment to share some thoughts. I began, my voice carrying clearly across the dining area. The Henderson family smiled expectantly, probably anticipating another opportunity to publicly cement my role as their financial benefactor. This week has been truly educational. I continued making eye contact with each family member in turn. The Henderson family has taught me lessons about relationships, generosity, and family values that I'll never forget. Gary beamed and raised his wine glass. "To family." "To family," I agreed, raising my own glass before continuing. "Gary, you've shown me how important it is to be direct about your needs. Your straightforward approach to asking for help has been illuminating." Gary nodded, completely missing the subtle edge in my tone. "Linda, your lessons about emotional connection have been so valuable. You've demonstrated how powerful personal stories can be when building relationships." Linda dabbed at her eyes with her napkin, clearly touched by what she interpreted as genuine gratitude. "Tyler and Haley, you've taught me about the importance of sharing experiences with people you care about. Your enthusiasm for making memories together has been truly inspiring." The young couple grinned and held hands, basking in my apparent appreciation. "And Brittany," I said, turning to my sister-in-law, "you've helped me understand the complexities of family loyalty and the difficult choices we sometimes have to make." Jake squeezed Brittany's hand, looking pleased that I was acknowledging his wife's perspective. "I've learned so much about generosity this week." I continued, my voice growing slightly stronger. "About the difference between giving freely and giving under pressure. About the difference between family support and family exploitation." A few people around the table shifted uncomfortably, perhaps sensing a change in my tone. "I've learned that some people view kindness as weakness and mistakes, generosity for stupidity." The restaurant was completely quiet now, other guests clearly sensing that something significant was happening. Most importantly, I said, my voice steady and clear, I've learned that sometimes the most generous thing you can do for people is to stop enabling their behavior. Gary's smile faltered slightly. Linda's eyes narrowed. So, I want to thank each of you for these valuable lessons. Tomorrow morning when you wake up, you'll discover that I've arranged a very special gift for all of you. Linda leaned forward, her voice uncertain. What kind of gift, sweetie? My smile was warm and completely genuine. The gift of personal responsibility. I reached into my purse and pulled out carefully prepared envelopes for each family member. I've written each of you a personal note expressing my gratitude for what you've taught me. I hope you'll read them first thing in the morning. As I handed out the envelopes, I continued speaking to the entire table. I have to leave early tomorrow morning for a work emergency, I announced. I won't be able to say goodbye in person, so I wanted to make sure I properly thanked everyone tonight. You're leaving early? Brittany's voice was sharp with concern. Just me, I said calmly. Everyone else can continue enjoying their vacation. All the arrangements have been taken care of. Gary relaxed visibly. Well, that's thoughtful of you to handle the details before you leave. I believe in handling details thoroughly, I agreed. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of small talk and nervous laughter. The Henderson family seemed slightly unsettled by my speech, but they couldn't quite identify what had changed. They were accustomed to my compliance, not my confidence. After dinner, I made my rounds saying goodbye to their friends, thanking them for making this week so memorable, and expressing hope that their remaining vacation days would be exactly what they deserve. Marcus clapped me on the back. You're the coolest sister-in-law ever, Almira. Thanks for including us in your family celebration. It's been my absolute pleasure, I said sincerely. At 2:00 in the morning, while the resort slept peacefully around me, I moved through my room like a ghost, packing the last of my belongings into my suitcase. Every movement was deliberate and quiet. I'd already completed the most important preparations. Working with Carmen, I'd reversed all the fraudulent charges to the Henderson family's personal accounts. Their rooms, meals, activities, spa treatments, excursions, and their friends' accommodations were now their personal responsibility. The charges would process at exactly 8 a.m. My credit cards had been secured, and new ones were being expedited to my home address. The fraud reports were filed with both Mexican and U.S. authorities. The resort had documentation of every unauthorized charge and every false claim made using my name. More importantly, I documented everything for social media. The recordings of their conversations, the receipts showing their systematic exploitation, the timeline of their manipulation tactics, everything was ready to post from the airport. I left the carefully crafted letters on the dresser where housekeeping would find them and deliver them at exactly 8 a.m. For Gary, thank you for teaching me that family takes care of family means each member contributes according to their ability. I'm confident you'll demonstrate this principle by taking care of your own expenses going forward. For Linda, your lesson about emotional manipulation has been invaluable. I now understand how people use others' kindness against them. I won't make that mistake again. For Tyler, your honesty about milking family was truly educational. I'm grateful for your transparency about your intentions. For Brittany, you've shown me that loyalty without integrity is worthless. Jake deserves better than someone who would sacrifice his family relationships for personal gain. For Jake, I love you enough to let you learn from your choices. When you're ready to choose integrity over convenience, I'll be here. And finally, for the friends, you were invited here under false pretenses. The person who should be paying for your stay is the person who invited you. I hope this experience teaches you to verify arrangements independently in the future. At 5:30 a.m., a prearranged taxi waited outside the resort's main entrance. The night manager who'd been briefed by Carmen helped me with my luggage without waking any of the staff who knew the Henderson family. As we drove through the empty Mexican streets toward the airport, I felt something I hadn't experienced in days' peace. My phone was already buzzing with social media notifications as my posts went live. The carefully edited recordings of the Henderson family discussing their exploitation strategy were spreading rapidly, tagged with everyone who'd commented on their original vacation photos. The caption was simple: "Sometimes family teaches you exactly what love isn't. Thank you for the education." By the time my plane lifted off at 7 a.m., the story was going viral. Comments poured in from people sharing their own experiences with family financial manipulation, praising my courage for exposing the exploitation and expressing outrage at the Henderson family's behavior. But the best part was knowing that in exactly 1 hour, the Henderson family would wake up to discover that their luxury vacation had become their personal financial nightmare. As I watched the sunrise from 30,000 feet, I realized I wasn't running away from anything. I was flying toward the rest of my life, a life where I would never again mistake exploitation for love or manipulation for family loyalty. The Hendersons thought they'd broken me down into a compliant victim. Instead, they'd forged me into something stronger than they ever imagined possible. The text from Carmen arrived during my layover in Houston. "You should see the chaos here. It's like Christmas morning, but for karma." Over the next hour, I received a steady stream of updates from my unexpected ally at the resort. At exactly 8 a.m., the Henderson family had discovered that their luxury vacation fantasy had become a very expensive reality check. Gary was the first to realize something was wrong when his room service breakfast was declined at the door. The server politely explained that there were issues with the account and payment would need to be resolved before any additional charges could be processed. Linda's meltdown apparently began when the spa called to inform her that her scheduled massage had been canceled due to account problems. According to Carmen, Linda's voice could be heard throughout the main lobby as she demanded to speak to management about the billing errors. But the real fireworks started when Tyler and Haley tried to check out of their room and discovered they were personally responsible for every charge they'd accumulated over the week. The total for their room alone was over $3,000. Tyler actually tried to argue that there must be a mistake, Carmen reported via text. He insisted that Almira handles all the family financial stuff and couldn't seem to understand that you weren't responsible for charges made to their personal account. The Henderson friends were apparently the first to read my goodbye letters since they were early risers planning a final beach walk. Jessica called Carmen's office at 7:45 a.m., demanding to know why their room charges weren't covered as promised. When Carmen explained that their accommodations were the responsibility of whoever invited them, Jessica went ballistic. She stormed to Gary and Linda's suite, banging on the door and demanding explanations. "The friends turned on the Henderson family faster than you could imagine," Carmen texted. "Once they realized they'd been lied to about who was paying for what the group completely fell apart. Marcus, the bowling buddy who'd handed me his luggage like I was hotel staff, was threatening to sue Gary for fraud. Dennis and Carol were furious about being dragged into a scam and demanded that Gary pay for their flights home immediately. Meanwhile, my social media posts were creating a secondary disaster for the Henderson family. The recordings I'd shared showed them explicitly discussing their manipulation strategy, laughing about exploiting my generosity, and planning to extend their financial assault beyond the vacation. Haley's Instagram followers, who'd originally praised my generosity, were now leaving scathing comments about the family's behavior. Several people who knew the Hendersons personally were sharing additional stories about their pattern of financial manipulation within their community. By noon, local news outlets in their hometown had picked up the story. A reporter from their community newspaper called Carmen, asking for comment about the Henderson family vacation fraud incident. But the most satisfying update came that evening when Jake finally called. "Almira, what have you done?" His voice was strained and exhausted. "I stopped being a victim," I replied calmly. "The resort is demanding $32,000 before they'll let anyone leave. Brittany's parents are blaming me for having a selfish sister. Their friends are threatening to sue. This is a complete disaster." "It sounds like everyone is learning about personal responsibility," I said. "You can't just abandon family when things get difficult." The irony in his statement was breathtaking. "Jake, where was that family loyalty when you watched them exploit me for a week? Where was your protection when they humiliated me in front of strangers and planned to use me as their personal bank account for years?" Jake was quiet for a long moment. "I didn't know it was that bad." "You knew exactly how bad it was. You chose to ignore it because dealing with your wife's anger was harder than watching your sister get destroyed." The silence stretched between us until Jake's voice cracked. "What am I supposed to do now?" "You're supposed to figure out how to be the man our parents raised you to be," I said gently. "And that journey starts with taking responsibility for the choices you've made." Over the following weeks, the aftermath unfolded like a perfectly orchestrated symphony of consequences. The Henderson family had to borrow money from multiple sources to pay their resort bill. Gary's brother lent them $15,000, but only after Linda signed a formal loan agreement with interest. Brittany's grandmother contributed another $10,000 from her retirement savings, expressing deep disappointment in the family's behavior. Their friends filed a small claims court case demanding reimbursement for their flights and lost vacation time. While they didn't win monetary damages, the public court records became part of the permanent documentation of the Henderson family's manipulation tactics. Gary's unemployment benefits were suspended pending an investigation into the fraud charges. The state employment office determined that someone capable of orchestrating elaborate financial scams was capable of finding work, and his benefits were permanently revoked. Linda's social standing in their community evaporated completely. Her book club, church group, and neighborhood association all quietly excluded her after the vacation story became local gossip. The woman who'd once prided herself on her social connections found herself isolated and avoided. Tyler and Haley's relationship crumbled under the financial pressure. Haley realized that Tyler's willingness to manipulate his own family members revealed fundamental character flaws that would inevitably affect their relationship. She moved out of their shared apartment and blocked him on all social media platforms. Most importantly, Jake and Brittany's marriage collapsed within 3 months. The stress of the vacation aftermath revealed deeper incompatibilities in their values and priorities. Jake began to understand that Brittany's loyalty to her family's exploitation scheme meant she would always prioritize manipulation over integrity. The divorce was quiet but decisive. Jake moved into a small apartment and started therapy, finally ready to examine how he'd allowed himself to become complicit in his sister's exploitation. Meanwhile, I was rebuilding and strengthening my own life. The credit card disputes were resolved in my favor, with every fraudulent charge reversed, and my credit score actually improving due to my proactive handling of the situation. My blog about family financial boundaries became unexpectedly popular. Thousands of people shared similar stories of being exploited by relatives who used guilt and social pressure to extract money. The community that formed around these shared experiences became a source of healing and education for people learning to set healthy boundaries. Carmen and I maintained our friendship with her visiting me during her vacation time in the States. Through her, I learned what healthy family relationships looked like: families that supported each other without exploitation, that showed love through respect rather than manipulation. The most meaningful transformation was my own psychological healing. I realized that my desperate need to be seen as generous and family-oriented had made me vulnerable to people who would exploit those very qualities. Learning to say no wasn't selfish, it was self-preservation. 6 months after the vacation, Jake appeared at my apartment door. He looked thinner and older, but there was something different in his eyes, a clarity that hadn't been there before. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said immediately. "I just want you to know that I understand what I did wrong." I invited him in and we talked for 3 hours. Jake had spent months in therapy examining how his fear of conflict had led him to enable abuse. He'd learned about manipulation tactics, family dysfunction, and the difference between peacekeeping and enabling. "I chose the easy path instead of the right path," he admitted. "I let them destroy you because confronting them would have been harder for me. That makes me just as guilty as they were." Jake didn't ask for our relationship to return to what it had been before. Instead, he asked for the opportunity to slowly rebuild trust through consistent actions rather than empty promises. It took another year, but eventually Jake proved that his transformation was genuine. He started dating someone new, a woman who shared his values about integrity and family loyalty. When he introduced us, I could see that he'd learned to choose partners who brought out his best qualities rather than his weakest ones. The Henderson family's story became a cautionary tale in our extended network. Other relatives who'd been considering similar exploitation tactics quietly abandoned their plans after seeing the complete social and financial destruction that had resulted from the vacation incident. As I reflected on that week in Mexico, I realized the sunrise I'd flown toward wasn't just an escape, it was a rebirth. The woman who'd allowed herself to be systematically exploited had died in that resort room. The woman who'd emerged was stronger, wiser, and infinitely more discerning about relationships. The greatest lesson wasn't about money or family or even justice. It was about the power of choosing yourself over toxic peace. For years, I'd believed that avoiding conflict was the same as maintaining harmony. The vacation taught me that some conflicts are necessary for growth, and some relationships aren't worth preserving if they require you to sacrifice your dignity and financial security. The Hendersons thought they'd found the perfect mark, someone too nice and too image-conscious to fight back. They never imagined that their victim would transform into someone willing to destroy their entire social and financial foundation rather than submit to ongoing exploitation. The surprise I left them wasn't just the financial consequences of their actions, it was the mirror that forced them to see exactly who they'd become, people who would systematically exploit someone's kindness and then blame that person for being money-obsessed when they finally said no. But perhaps the most important surprise was discovering my own strength. I'd always seen myself as someone who valued harmony over conflict, generosity, over boundaries, family loyalty, over personal protection. The vacation forced me to learn that real love doesn't exploit, real family doesn't manipulate, and real harmony comes from mutual respect, not one-sided sacrifice. Walking away from people who don't value you isn't cruel, it's the most loving thing you can do for yourself. And sometimes the people who claim to love you most are the ones you most need to protect yourself from. The Henderson family taught me that lesson in the most expensive way possible. But as I sit here today, financially secure, emotionally healthy, and surrounded by people who love me, without expecting me to pay for the privilege, I can honestly say it was worth every penny. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family members or friends took advantage of your generosity? How did you handle it? And what did you learn about setting boundaries with people who claim to love you? Share your story in the comments below. You never know who might need to hear that they're not alone in these experiences. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe for more real-life stories about family dynamics, personal growth, and learning to choose yourself over toxic relationships. And don't forget to share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the importance of financial and emotional boundaries. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, you're never obligated to set yourself on fire to keep other people warm. Sometimes the most generous thing you can do is teach people to light their own matches.